Greetings and brought up real quick flash announcement. I'm going to be playing the episode really early today. Early as in right after this announcement. Thank you, Scott Roberts, again from Scott Roberts Law, for sitting down and discussing the difference between a criminal and a corporate lawyer when it comes to cannabis. Amazing episode, y'all. Make sure you check it, like, favorite, subscribe, all that other stuff. But more importantly, take away a lesson from this. It's good that we definitively define the differences between, what a criminal lawyer does and what a, corporate lawyer does. The episode a little bit earlier, sooner than later. I don't like being late for anything. I feel I'll be late for my own funeral, but if that's the only thing I'm late for, then we're doing good, right? But no, I'm going to be at Big Clouds this weekend, y'all, filming, doing a little bit of a feature. There's some important people and inspiring people that are going to be there tonight. I've got to make sure I catch this. And in order to be able to catch this and film this and capture it and put it into, a cinematic story, I need to be there. That's the thing. So in order to be there, that's when my show would happen. So you see why we're doing it early. But yeah, without any other further rambling on or ado in my part, here it is, the episode with Scott Roberts from Scott Roberts Law, y'all. Enjoy, and I'll catch you on the flip. Peace.
Question me about my thing, just do your thing and be cool. Cause I know exactly whose I am. Don't worry about it, homie, do you. Cause I've been rapping for a minute now. Used to walk around dead, but I'm living now. I'm just being myself. And evidently people gon' hate when you coming with a different sound. So don't question me about my thing, just do your thing and be cool. Cause I know exactly whose I am. Don't worry about it, homie, do you. Cause I've been rapping for a minute now. Used to walk around dead, but I'm living now. I'm just being myself. And evidently people gon' hate when you coming with a different sound.
What's up, my tokers, jokers, and smokers? Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Chronicles and the solution to all the audio problems in the world. I'm here with my man Scott Roberts from Scott Roberts Class. Scott, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for having me. You're welcome, bro. I'm sorry, man. We tried to do this again. We were talking some really good points. We'll get back to those in a second. But for some reason the mic it was just not picking up your voice. But we can hear you loud and clear. Scott, man, thanks for coming on the show. A lot of respect for what you do, as far as law and stuff like that. Now, there are a couple of types of cannabis law. I know we already went over them, but for the sake of, my embarrassment here, save me. Help me save.
I'd like to break it down into two types. There's the, criminal cannabis attorneys. That's, if you get, you're driving under the influence, or you get caught with too much, or you're a caregiver and you have some overages and, the police come knocking at your door. That's the one type of cannabis lawyer, the criminal type. And then the second type is the business type, or the corporate processors, retailers. Help them start up the company, structure it properly, get all the licenses that they need to do what they want to do, and then, kind of help them on the regulatory side to make sure they stay in compliance with the law.
That can't be an easy job. There's a lot of people that, and I know a few caregivers personally that have went from being caregivers to the more legitimate.
So, I like to say the caregivers are kind of operating in a gray market, and I've helped a lot of them go, into, I guess, the white.
Right, the pro, if you will. Yeah. So let me ask you this. I heard, and this is a good question for you, I heard that there was some allegations, okay? Not against anybody particular, but specifically caregivers. There were some allegations about the state saying that caregivers were supposed to actually be paying taxes anyway, but no one knows what to pay, when, where, and why, and that there could be something coming down the pipeline that kind of corners caregivers into owing back taxes. Is that a true rumor that I'm hearing, or is that like somebody made some shit up?
I mean, I feel like that rumor has been out there for years. I feel like maybe I heard that first in like 2018. Mm-hmm. And then it didn't quite happen as people thought it would. So, it's like one of those things, you hear it every once in a while and you expect it to eventually happen. You are supposed to pay taxes as a caregiver, and you are subject to 280E as a caregiver, and that can be quite an onerous tax burden, and the government does like its tax. and they do think of marijuana businesses as somewhat of a easy target, I guess you could say. So I guess we'll see. You know, like I said, I think I heard that first in like early 18, and it didn't quite materialize as everyone had thought it would. And I have heard it again recently, but until it, you know, materializes, I'm just going to kind of put it in the back of my head. And, you know, I always tell people to pay their taxes, so it's not like it changes anything on my end.
It's like Ben Franklin said, you know, way back in the day, and I don't like a lot about that guy, but he did some good things. Two things in life are certain: death and taxes, you know, and that's the point of it. You got to pay taxes, you know, and if you're not paying taxes as a caregiver, I mean, that's kind of an issue, you know. Now, at the same time, a lot of people these days are having trouble affording their taxes. Is there any help out there for people that, let's say, they're doing good, they're a great business, they've been a great business, you know, they're having some issues with their taxes, they're having some financial issues because of the tightening of the belts lately in the market, and they're either forced to close doors, or is there any, like, is there help out there for these business owners is really my question.
I mean, that's something that, you know, I do believe maybe, you know, you can have some level of negotiation with our IRS in terms of back taxes. It's not really something I've ever done or specialize in, but I do know there are other lawyers that do. Right. And, you know, in the end, the government just wants to get paid. Sure. And as long as you offer that solution and you have a good professional there to represent you, because, you know, dealing with the IRS is no joke. Mm-hmm. You know, I do believe there are, you know, avenues that you can pursue.
Great, and that's an amazing question, you know, for or an amazing answer for a question right off the top of my head, you know. And I look at those things like that. Like, I look at, you know, my, you know, friends that are caregivers. I look at my friends that are in corporate. I look at my friends that grow at home, and it's interesting because as much as some of them want to deny it, you know, law is important to all three facets of that, you know. Have you found that there's a need for more of a need for what you do with the, I don't want to call it the gold rush in Michigan, but the green rush, you know, like the cannabis rush? Like, have you become busier, or what's the scoop there?
Oh, yeah. So, you know, my background before I got into cannabis, I was a corporate lawyer, specializing mostly in representing healthcare companies. Mm-hmm. But I also represented a lot of kind of real estate holding companies, a lot of foreign investors in the Detroit market. And, you know, once I kind of started getting into, you know, working with cannabis companies in 2017, I found that there was a huge need for what I did, because a lot of these, you know, companies were, you know, used to working with the criminal cannabis lawyers. And, you know, they actually had the need for the corporate type. Right. And, you know, through 17 and 18 and 19, I think a lot of them kind of realized, hey, the lawyer that they've been working with since, like, you know, 2015, who, you know, has a, you know, DUI practice and just so happens to work with cannabis businesses, you know, that might not be the best lawyer for you anymore. The best lawyer may be just a regular corporate lawyer that has cannabis experience. So, you know, I kind of came into this with a very unique skill set, having worked with healthcare companies, mm-hmm. Having helped them navigate all the healthcare laws, you know, STARK, anti-kickback, and all the ownership restrictions that are applicable to healthcare companies. So, you know, to kind of move that to cannabis was a very, very easy transition. It was basically taking one statute, instead of working with this statute, I'm working with a different statute. So, you know, when I was first got into cannabis, I, you know, had my own firm. I was a solo practice attorney, and now we're up to 6 attorneys. So there's definitely been an increased demand for my services.
So was it hard? Okay, so you talk about statutes. Okay, so you know, going back to that, you know, you say corporate lawyer, then you say cannabis lawyer. There's different statutes, obviously. You've pointed out. That being said, is it difficult to go from one stature to the other, or is it pretty decently the same?
I mean, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's not difficult either. You know, to be a good corporate lawyer, that takes a lot of time. I worked at a big firm for 4 years, and put another 3 or 4 years in private practice before I felt confident that I could do everything I needed to do myself without having to call up an old mentor or something like that. So that skill set is a tough skill set to build. Once you build that, I think adding the cannabis on top of it is a lot easier. And then I also kind of had the advantage of, when I got into it, no one had worked with the statute. It was brand spanking new, so no one had more experience than I did.
That levels the playing field.
That helps.
Yeah, that definitely levels the playing field. Being a cannabis attorney, and now more corporate than criminal. What is a trend that you're beginning to notice with some of the people that you're the clients, I guess you could say, like with your clients? What's a trend you're starting to notice, if at any?
I think there's the thought that you need to almost scale. So I think that the trend, I would say, if I was to summarize 2022 in a nutshell so far, go big or go home. It's tough to be a single licensee with one retail facility or a small to mid-sized grow facility. Not to say they can't survive and thrive, but it's getting increasingly tough to be profitable without achieving a certain amount of scale. So what you're seeing a lot of these people do is either they're looking to sell to a bigger company, or they're looking to expand. And I think that's the trend for this year that I'm seeing, and I expect it to just continue.
Yeah, ideally it will. You know what I mean? Ideally, that's in a perfect world, that's the way that we want to go. To spin off of that, describe to me your perfect customer. You get a new call, hey man, I heard this is what you do. Yep, that's exactly what I do. We'll set up a meeting. Now, before that meeting, you'll send them an email saying, hey, please have these things, and let's say that they bring them, okay? Describe to me the perfect customer where it's just like a click and drag for you.
So, I think the perfect customer would be, the person that maybe is a caregiver, wants to go legit, maybe already has certain, state licenses, wants to expand, and they need help on, the corporate level to make sure they do it right, the licensing level to make sure they get the licenses that they want or need, and then the regulatory level. So, I work with a lot of brands, some of the bigger brands. I don't want to name drop, but maybe I do. So, we work with a lot of the brands. We work with a lot of larger vertically integrated companies. We work with a lot of smaller vertically integrated companies, and we work with a lot of single licensees. Each one has its own challenges, but, all of them together is kind of what keeps it interesting for me.
It sounds very lucrative as well for everyone involved. It's a brand new industry. That's the point, and it's interesting because this next question, it's hard for me to even answer, and I'm brand new to this, so I can only surmise that, people in the industry are going to be like, well, I don't know. So let's say that cannabis were never illegal to begin with. Let's just say it started back then. Do you think it would have been more difficult for people back then, so say a corporate lawyer, to do what it is you do now back then? Because we have computers and shit, so it's easier to communicate, you know what I'm saying? It's easier to have these video chats. It's easier to get the process rolling. Obviously back then we didn't have technology like in the 20s and 30s and stuff. But, do you think that it would have been easier without all of the laws and stuff nowadays that surround statutes, or do you think it would have been harder?
Both. Easier just because, it would probably be a lot less regulated.
Yeah.
And the complex regulations is what makes what I do more challenging. Okay. When, every 6 to 12 months, there's a new 150-page rule set, and you got to adopt because what was true a year ago isn't true now. So in that respect, it would probably be much easier. It would also be more difficult because, to be quite honest, I don't know how lawyers wrote contracts before computers. Like, did they just have like it's still something like it's probably some old person.
You probably had somebody who was like a scribe or something. That would make sense.
Yeah, like a secretary with like a typewriter or something. Because I will say, without a computer, my job would be so much more difficult. Right. The thing about corporate lawyers that we don't like to really talk about is we're always just plagiarizing contracts. We're never really like redrafting a contract. I mean, we're taking a contract we did before, adjusting it for the new situation, and not reinventing the wheel. So I might, if I draft a 30-page contract, I may only have drafted half a page of that, and the rest.
I heard what it is you're sharing templates. That's what I heard.
Yeah. So I mean, there is no such thing as plagiarism in the corporate law set. Everyone is copying each other's contracts, and that's just the way it is. And that's honestly, that's best for everyone. I mean, if I had to write a 30-page contract each time a client wanted a contract, it would be so expensive for them and so for me. So it works out. But how they did it 100 years ago, that would have been really tough.
And that's something that I've looked at too. And like I said, it's difficult for even me to answer, what I do, because let's face it, without social media being the way it is, without the ease of this filming and film itself, what I would do is kind of redundant, and that's the thing. So it might be easier in the aspect of less regulations, and less whatever, but there's more, difficulty because of less technology. So there's that, and I do appreciate you taking a stab at that. And a lot of people don't really look at that perspective, and the point behind that is sometimes I feel when lawyers, no matter who they are, and no matter what they're representing, they overcomplicate things for like seemingly no reason. You know what I mean? Like, for example, like, why can't you just call a house a house? Why do you gotta call it tutelage? Nobody even... I've watched people look up the word tutelage as they're adding the word tutelage to a come on. It's a house. Like, why is that? Like, is that a thing?
He actually graduated from Harvard. And he's like you. He's like plain language on everything. And for me, it's like, well, there's a certain precision to a lot of the legalese that's probably lost on the layperson. But sometimes we'll use these kind of obscure words because we know it has a very specific meaning within the law. And if we use a more general word, there creates some ambiguity. Though on the other hand, I'm handling a matter right now with a larger law firm, and I was having this conversation last night with someone. I was like, why are we complicating this? This is not that difficult. Can't we just get this done? You're debating things that don't really matter. Let's just get the contract signed. So, there is some truth with some lawyers, and that we do have the tendency to overcomplicate things. But at the same time, sometimes there's a reason for that long boilerplate legalese that maybe is lost on most people, but, as corporate lawyers are like, that needs to be in there for this specific reason.
That is a really good answer, and for corporate law, it makes sense. For certain other laws, let's have a different discussion. You know what I mean? Like, that's the truth of it. But, and I've caught, people adding in stuff and writing stuff, and I've dealt with lawyers before, and I've watched them, and they will add a word, and then I'll look at them, research the word, search to make sure that the word fits the language, and then I ask them just simply, because, this is my attorney, what are we using that word for? And they explain it. I go, no one's going to know what that word means. He goes, that's what we want. I'm like, that's not good. You know what I mean? I was like, that's not good. But there is and I believe there is a law in the Constitution, correct me if I'm wrong, that basically says that it's not a layman's job to understand and know what law means. It's the lawyer. You see what I'm saying? Is there any truth to that, or did I completely badger that?
I have no idea.
I studied a little bit of Black's Law Dictionary, a little bit of common law.
That sounds horrible. I remember Black's Law from from law school. That was.
It's not fun. Yeah, no. But at the same time, if, I love lawyers. Lawyers have a great place in this world. They're often needed. But if there's a matter where I don't necessarily need a lawyer and I find myself in that position and I can represent myself, I'd like to know my rights enough to do that, just as an American citizen. And that's fair, that's fair. A lot of times there are a bunch of different laws, actually, that have nothing to do with cannabis that are kind of traps, to tell you the truth. Like, it's not technically a crime, but they're going to try and charge you with a crime, but they're not going to openly charge you with a crime so you don't get a lawyer. That happens a lot. They'll push it to a different court. And it's interesting because it's like, no. But back to cannabis. Is there a case that you can tell me about as far as, and I want to talk about driving under the influence. First and foremost, no one drive under the influence. If you feel too high, call Uber, call me, call Scott, just get a ride home.
Don't call me.
Don't call Scott. Call Scott if you're in jail. The point is,
Still don't call me. Call a criminal lawyer. I would be horrible.
That's right. Sorry, my bad. My point is, don't drive buzzed. Don't drive high. If you're high, have somebody else drive. That being said, if you are pulled over, what is the best advice that you can give that person in that situation as just a, completely not a corporate lawyer, not a lawyer, but just as Scott Roberts? You've seen these, just as Scott Roberts, what can you give that person, the best advice you can give them, just from one person to another?
Don't consent to search.
Yeah.
Ever. Like, I think that's something that any criminal lawyer would tell you as well, is just, don't consent to search. Mm-hmm. And don't admit anything if you don't have to.
Now, there was a reason I asked that, and I know you're not a criminal lawyer. Let's go back to the corporate side. Okay. Is that the same thing for someone to get raided or something happens that's not good? Is it the same advice to them, or is it a lot different?
It's a lot more tough.
Right.
But if we're talking about the CRA, the Cannabis Regulatory Agency here in Michigan, I tend to favor more of a cooperative approach with them. They're, for the most part, I've dealt with all the division heads there, the enforcement agents, and, I've kind of built up, I'd like to think, a fairly good reputation in working with them. So in those situations, a lot of times we will cooperate. So I won't just say, no, I'm not going to answer any of your questions. I will say, hey, I want to get to the bottom of this with you, and we'll solve this issue. And if there is an example of non-compliance, we will fix it together. And I kind of take more of a tact of, I would like to be a partner, because in the end, I'm kind of doing CRA's job for them, because their job is to make sure everyone complies with all the rules and regulations. Mm-hmm. And really, in the end, that's what I do, is make sure they do that. So, I tend to, take the path that, I consider them a partner. Having said that, there have been some times where I think they've stepped over the line with some of their actions, and I've had to fight back, but never my first choice.
So the reason that, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but the reason that we talked about the DUI and the criminal lawyer aspect is because I wanted to point out from, hearing it from you, that there is indeed a difference between criminal and corporate. I mean, somebody would be like, you're just a lawyer. I needed to illustrate the difference, so obviously don't consent to search, whereas on this end, hey, if they want to check something out, let them. You know what I mean? That's the point.
At a certain point, we can't really not say no. We kind of have to. And when we, get a state license, we are subjecting ourselves. We're agreeing that, the CRA can come into our facility at any time we want. So, it's not a matter of do we consent. It's a matter of we have to. There is no consent because they have the right to do it. But,
Sorry.
I would just say, the criminal and civil are so different. I don't pretend to know much of anything on criminal law. I was almost uncomfortable even asking that question about a DUI.
I was going somewhere with it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have. I was
so limited. But, on the business, the transactional side, it's very different. And, something where, it's just almost, it's like comparing a doctor and a dentist. It's just so different that it's really hard to even lump them together.
But in that case, you need a doctor or a dentist to point out the differences, and that was the illustration.
Sure.
Do you find yourself, as far as micro businesses, that's coming, we only have a certain number of them in the state, but it's a thing now, and do you find yourself doing business yet with any micro businesses, or are you, privy to that? Like, is that something that you look forward to, or what's the scoop there?
Yeah, the first 2 licensed micro businesses in Michigan were my clients.
Okay.
We're proud of that. We were kind of ahead of the curve. I will say, we hit some snags, and by we I mean really the client, in terms of there being some issues with the in-house processing, as well as testing costs, because we had such smaller batch sizes. We didn't realize, when we were doing the numbers, that our testing costs would be, so much higher in proportion to larger facilities. So that was, an issue. And, thankfully, CRA listened when we, told them, hey, we're having some of these issues, and if we could just fix these, we think these are going to be a much more viable business. And, CRA a few months ago did put out a new license type, a different type of micro business, a Class A micro business, that allowed people to take in processed products from outside, which kind of solved that problem, because everyone was really struggling, especially with the consistency. It's a lot harder to make the gummies with the precise consistency that the law requires than people think.
Right.
It's not just a matter of just, throwing some distillate in some Albany gummies and calling it a day. So there's that aspect. And then, the new license also doubles the plant count. So we could have larger batch sizes and therefore have, smaller testing costs in proportion to the weight being tested or the amount being sold. So, the state listened, and good on them for that. So I think with this new license type, you're going to see these businesses be more successful, and I think more popular in terms of, avenues for people to enter the industry.
I'll be honest with you, if I were to enter the industry with my own business of the type, it would be an on-site, like, bed and breakfast. I'm growing some plants, you know what I'm saying? Serve it all on-site, package it, everything on-site, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is the micro business, correct?
Yes, I mean, that is, micro business, you grow. With the Class A, you don't process, but you grow and sell all from one facility. So, I've always thought it's something that works very well in combination with a second business.
Yeah.
Whether it's a bed and breakfast, whether it's an arcade, it's some, just a lounge, like a cannabis lounge. I think it's something that does pair well with other businesses, but it's much easier said than done, because unfortunately the big restriction is zoning and municipal approval. And where it may make sense, say, to have a lounge and a micro business from a commercial aspect, the municipality may say, no, we don't want you there next to our downtown or anywhere near our downtown. We're going to tuck you away in, like, the industrial district. So, in a lot of ways, it's almost like, some of these companies or these facilities, it's like being forced to have, like, a bar or a liquor store, on an industrial side street. It doesn't really make sense from a zoning perspective, but at the same time, everyone's just like, no, we just want it out of the way. We don't want it to be the nuisance. We don't want, kids walking by it. So it ends up a lot of times in these really tucked away places that really don't make sense from a commercial perspective.
And I've seen that, a lot of cities say, we want the money, we would love the income, we don't want to see you, and that's the issue. And then it trickles down to advertising, on billboards and everything and the like, man. I've hit a little bit of guff, and I don't even sell any products. I've had my stuff taken down and stuff, and I don't sell anything. It's crazy.
Oh, I'm banned from Facebook ads. I'm just an attorney. 3 years ago, I ran some hemp ads for hemp growers and got banned by Facebook but they help, not the marijuana.
Yeah.
I've been kicked out of multiple banks. Again, just an attorney that, works with some cannabis businesses as a lawyer, nothing else. So, it's still, there's still these hurdles that really in 2022, I shouldn't have to worry that my law firm can get kicked out of another bank. But that's still the world we live in.
And that's my point. In the next few years, we're going to see what's going to happen. But we got to wrap it up here a little bit, man. I appreciate having you on the show. I got one quick last question for you, and then we're going to get out of here. Do you yourself, as a cannabis lawyer, corporate cannabis lawyer, do you consume cannabis?
Yes.
Okay. That was my only question, because, if I'm going to trust a lawyer or anybody to deal in cannabis, period, I want them to at least partake or have for whatever reason. Like, if you don't use cannabis or smoke, I kind of don't trust you, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there are people in this industry that don't use the product, and, to be quite honest, there's people in this industry that maybe use it a little too much for their job description. It's it's really hard to draft a contract high, so I don't do it. But if it's something like 9 o'clock, baby's in bed, it's not hurting anyone. Helps me go to sleep. But it can be taken too far sometimes. But then at the same time, I do kind of wonder about some of the people that have never used the product but own some of these businesses. And it's like, how well do you really know your consumer?
I agree, man. And that's the entire point of what I was trying to say. But Scott, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, man. Everybody, Scott Roberts Law. If you have any corporate law needs dealing with cannabis, I'm sure you can go to, scottrobertslaw.com.
You got it.
There it is, man. We'll scroll out of the screen here. But all my tokers, jokers, and smokers, you've hit another edition of the Daily Chronicles, y'all. Congratulations to your faces. Thank you for watching this episode. Scott, my man, thank you for coming on. We'll see you guys on the flip, y'all. Peace.
Thanks.